It's the same.
It's the only business.
It's the same like,
69 other insurance. They're all-
okay, we're live. We are live. And we are back to 397. Tucker, have you got an amendment for the Barry Tiff extension for us?
I sure do.
Can do that. Then we can get that bill moving, because I believe that one does have to go to appropriations too. And then I'm gonna try and move us on to 479. Which will then clear up Friday afternoon for right now until something else gets put in there. Or we're doing the education bill again, but we will try. All right, I know Chris had to go to a meeting,
Yeah, he looked over.
but he is out sick. And Ruth is drafting. So there's 4 of us. Welcome.
Good afternoon again. For the record, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Council. You have in front of you a committee amendment to H 397 as reported by the Committee on Government Operations. This amends the GovOps report to add a new section 22A, which contains the language from H 419, which extends the Barry TIF in subsection A from March 31st, 2026 to 2028. 2 years.
2 years.
And these are the contents of 419. It's just taken directly and put into this amendment for you.
And my understanding is that they have a housing project, affordable housing project they're working on down.
I would move this amendment favorably.
Okay,
Second, yes.
then you go.
Sorry, temporary joint fiscal office. I would like to correct the record from what I said previously. I was commenting on fiscal impacts when I heard dangers of assume. Extend the Barry TIF by 2 years, that it referred to the retention period instead of the incursion period. So we are unable to put an exact number because it depends on what Barry is going to incur in their incursion period. So we don't know the size of the debt, we don't know the structure of the debt. So it makes it impossible for us to forecast an education fund impact. I would like to note the gap between the period by which they were able to incur debt in 2039. So if they incur debt in 2027, then that only gives them 12 years to retain education fund increment. And so depending, right, the structure of the debt would likely extend beyond 2039, at which point only municipal tax income on that debt. So it kind of creates incentives to maybe Barry might come and ask for an extension of that retention period just to make debt financing easier. So wanted to flag that for you all.
Good conversation for next year.
It is, I'm just not overly thrilled with their homework on this. You have moved that we amend. Bill, is this H 397 by adding this is a separate amendment, right?
Mhm.
So draft 1.1 of H 397 with that language.
That's this amendment.
Okay, I need a clerk. You're the clerk.
Maybe.
Yes, you may be, unless Senator Brock is ranking member. No, you're vice chair.
Right.
So you can.
Not me.
All right, I don't know if there's a protocol.
Shall I call it?
We need to ask for further discussion. If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Senator Chittenden, yes. Senator Beck. Yes. Senator Brock.
Yes.
Senator Matos. Senator Hardy. Senator Gulick. Senator Cummings.
Yes,
That was on the amendment. Now I would move favorably the bill as so amended.
okay. Senator Chittenden has moved that we approve the bill as amended. That's H 397. Is there any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Senator Chittenden, yes. Senator Beck. Yes. Senator Brock.
Yes.
Senator Mathis. This is what he does. Senator Hardy. Senator Goodman. Senator Cummings.
Yes, I called that 403. Yeah, this,
If you want to.
yeah. This will be a piece of paper. That's good. This I know. Okay. Okay, she gets that, dump it down.
Email from Ken Wood regarding 479.
Yeah,
He says there is a possible amendment that JFO needs to the bill if the committee would like you to join them.
JF, do you know anything about a possible amendment?
I know you guys did it.
Okay, I'm getting the feeling that this is just not ready for prime time. We need to get the drafters here. We need to let JFO find out what they need. I don't know how things are gonna go on the floor tomorrow. If we're off, I will try and get this in before 1 o'clock. Stay tuned for announcements. We are scheduling the tax department tomorrow after the cannabis bill. So I think it'll take an hour or a little more to go through the bill.
Okay.
And I think we're trying to get one more grower. We've got one that I've been told is an inside grower, and we're trying to get one that's an outside grower. And other than that, it is beyond my pay grade because there's levels, and we will take that up. It's adjusting a lot of fees, and so we will take that up, look at the fees, try and focus on that and get it out of here. Tomorrow it also does some changing of how some of the tax dollars flow, whether or not they go to the cannabis board and then to the general fund or direct to the general fund to be appropriated. And so we will look at that tomorrow. And if I can't get 479 in before Friday, I apologize. I'm putting these on the agenda if they come to us. So the committees hold these out until the last 2 days of the session. It's risky. Okay.
If that's what you want to do, all I want to say is, if there's that timeline for folks and so on, do you want to do 479 and we can do a floor amendment for what they're talking about, just to keep the calendar going? So if we did that.
Now we're going to be here next week, and folks could take that moment. Vote it out. There it is. There is the amendment. We just maybe from.
You want me to see if I can get Cameron down here to just
Cameron
provide
did-
what's going on?
I don't think Cameron did our section of the bill.
Okay.
I think we need John. And I'm sure John isn't free. Because we're looking at the TIF section, but I'm not really comfortable voting that out until I can find. Can Cameron walk us through? Ask him if he can come down and just give us a 2,000-foot view of the rest of it. Chris, maybe you can find out what's going on.
Yeah, it's news to me, Madam Chair. I'll try to track it down.
Were you planning to vote out another bill?
Pardon?
Were you planning to vote out another bill?
Maybe. I'm trying to find a drafter or somebody for 479. I may be voting in New Enfield. I don't know.
Oh, look at that.
Hello.
Hello. Okay. Cameron,
Yes, ma'am.
trying to get 479 out of here because
Yes.
it needs, there's anxiety about getting it through. And we know that John is the drafter for the chip section. Senator Chittenden has raised his hand and attested that the chip section is exactly the same as we passed it. Just want to make sure that there is nothing else in there that we should know about before we kick it out of here. Can you-
Sure. I've been wrong before, so that's why.
Yeah, I mean, and then we heard there was something joint fiscal.
Yeah, and that was a misstatement on my part. So,
Okay,
yes,
you just made Chris's life easy.
yes. My apologies for the heartburn thing.
It is the end of the session. Yeah.
For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. Your agenda, rest assured you are accurate in this instance. So the proposal for the proposed amendment to 479, it contains nearly, it's nearly identical to what you all passed in S-127 earlier this year. There are a few minor tweaks to some of the programs. So the Senate Economic Development Committee adopted the proposed changes to the VHIP program that the House proposed. So I'd be happy to run through those quickly if you
Okay,
would like.
yeah.
There's a few minor things there. The CHIP language is included in the proposal from Senate Economic Development, and it is exactly what you all passed earlier this year in 127 with no changes.
Can you just kind of walk us through what's there?
Sure. Give me one moment. Charlotte, do you mind sharing a Zoom link with me, please? And I will pull up the bill.
Is that the same as current use in that last bill? That's the same
Yes.
use value
Yes.
appraisal as current use.
You're appraised that, how are you using it? Standardly would be appraised at highest and best use, which is usually developed land, unless you're a cliff. Then you're appraised at the value farm fields, not that we could put on menus and.
Okay. So this is, what we're looking at here is draft 5.1. This is the proposed amendment to 479 that was voted out of the Committee on Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. And so, you know, we'll try to be relatively succinct here because again, a lot of this stuff has already been reviewed when Section 1, Vermont Rental Housing Improvement Program. The primary difference to what passed out of the Senate earlier in S-127 is regarding the 5-year forgivable loans. So, pardon me, I'm just trying to get to the right section here. It's in subsection E. So the Senate proposal was to strike the 5-year forgivable loans and just keep the grants. So currently, if you have a grant or a 5-year forgivable loan,
the landlord has to lease the unit to someone that is exiting homelessness, working with a refugee resettlement agency, etc. And then the proposal down here, further down, is for the 10-year loans to go back to fair market rent. That's how the program was prior to last year. So this is kind of reverting back to how it was. The Senate version was getting rid of the 5-year forgivable loan, so it would just be grants or 10-year loans. The House version kept the 5-year option just to give options for, individuals.
So is this bill as it came from the House or as it's been voted out?
This is the proposal that's voted out of Senate Economic Development Committee.
Okay.
Mhm. Which was just a strike all, and it was kind of incorporating certain aspects that the House wanted and incorporating other aspects that the Senate
Okay,
had.
because that says it's a grant or a 5-year forgivable loan.
And that's current.
That's current.
Mhm.
Did they strike that?
The Senate version, your version of 127 that you all passed out of the
Yeah.
Senate struck that language right there, the
Okay,
5-year.
but this bill, as it came out, they've changed their mind
Yes,
and
ma'am.
they're leaving it in.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Because that's what the House wanted, and there was some consensus there. Okay, if the House wants it, we'll keep it. So, with that, because it's being kept, there was also an incorporation from some other work that the House did, and getting to it, I believe it's going to be here on page 5. So, because the proposal from the administration was for the 10-year loans to go back to allowing landlords to rent those units to individuals for fair market rent, instead of requiring those units to be leased to somebody who's within those populations of people, homelessness, refugees, etc. The House wanted them to set aside annually a minimum amount that would go to the grants and the 5-year loans so that they could ensure that a minimum amount of the funds would be servicing individuals in those populations. And so they kept the 5-year loan, which the Senate Economic Development Committee is now proposing to do as well. And it also includes this language, which is a minimum amount. It is set at least 30%, but it can be set higher than that annually. And then it has the department consulting with AHS on the availability of housing vouchers, et cetera, to determine where that threshold should be set, but it has to be a minimum of 30.
okay.
30%
So
of the
this
fund.
is, but this would,
This was not in your Senate version.
Right.
This is new.
but that also, if there's money going into this fund, that's an appropriation issue, not ours.
Correct. Just letting you know, these are some
Yeah.
changes over what you voted out earlier this year. And then this also, the funds that are not utilized after 9 months for the set aside. So funds that have been set aside, not utilized after 9 months, can become available for the 10-year. So we're okay with the minimum set aside. If they're not being used, open them up to everything else. And then it also includes an annual report on program outcomes coming to the General Assembly. Those were pieces that were in the House version of 479. They were not in your Senate version of 127 that the Senate Economic Development Committee is going to incorporate and keep. So that's really the only change there. There were some very minor language changes to the Infrastructure Sustainability Fund. Sorry, I'm skipping over section 2, manufactured home improvement repair. No changes to what you guys passed. When you get to section 3, which is the Infrastructure Sustainability Fund, there were very minor technical changes here. The biggest change, or the biggest inclusion, I should say, is at the end, where it has a revolving fund. There was the inclusion of allowing the bond bank to use the money in conjunction with other programs that they administer to kind of leverage those dollars, with other funds that they have to ensure the biggest investments that they could make. So that language was included. The bond bank argues that they probably have the authority to do that, the inherent authority to do that, but they wanted some express language. So that was included. Other than that, let me look through my note real quick. Just I'm gonna walk through pieces that were not in S-127 quickly, so. This is a planning committee that was in your version S-127, so it's still there. And please, if you want me to stop and go into more detail, I'm more than happy to, just recognize the time. Okay, so this section 6, these next few sections were not in S-127, so this would be new language. It was in the House version of the bill that you all just haven't seen yet as a committee. So this is tax department housing data access. So this is the section where municipalities have to provide information to the tax department in order to file grand list data. And the administration is proposing to add an extract of the computer assisted mass appraisal system. So the systems that towns use and just providing extract of that information to the tax department. And then in conjunction with that, there's some amendments to the landlord certificate. This is a certificate. It's information that landlords provide to the tax department so they can provide, rental rebates for people. There were some changes to the landlord certificate that were made last year. There needs to be some kind of administrative tweaks to fix some things that were misstated and accidentally deleted last year. And so you're repealing what you did last year, reinserting very similar language in section 8 to the landlord certificate.
What are we adding? Because that was a topic of discussion. What's private? I know the tax commissioner was up to 80% compliance or something, getting those certificates. And there was concern or trying to find balance over our desire to know everything. And the concern that asking for everything would cause some landlords to say no.
Right.
And trying to find that balance. So
the biggest change in what is here, what's being proposed here versus what was done last year is last year, you all proposed to remove the requirement that the landlord provide the school property account number, the SPAN number. So it was currently required. Your proposal was to remove it. And I think that my assumption here, as I was not here, my assumption is that was either inadvertent or overlooked, etc., because the tax department needs that information
Yeah,
because
I
it's the
don't-
only way they can precisely locate.
I
the
don't
property.
ever remember talking about removing.
Right, and so that was removed, so we're adding that back in. And then,
There were things like rent that,
so yes, ma'am, so the change that was made last year would require the landlord to provide the gross monthly rent. And this new language that you would be inserting if you agreed to this would remove that requirement. So the landlord wouldn't have to provide that. My understanding in talking with Kirby, my colleagues, and et cetera, is it's information they don't feel is necessary. They don't need that information to administer the landlord certificate. So, they want to ensure compliance, as you mentioned, Madam Chair, so they can get the rebates out as quickly as possible. And so that is the biggest change, I would say, from what you're repealing that was done last year versus what's added in
economic
here.
development did that. Okay. Because I know that there's a lot of housing advocates that would like that information, but there seems to be some reluctance on the part of landlords to give it out. If you're getting subsidies like talked about before, you have to comply with the rent. But, yeah, okay.
The other, I would say, piece of this that was removed is it was added last year to include the year the rental unit was built.
Oh.
And what the tax department testified in Senate Economic Development was it's not needed on the landlord certificate. A, landlord may not know, but B, it's going to be information they're going to get from the CAMA system from the municipality directly. So it's not information that they're going to need to get separately from the landlord. So they felt that that was covered. They were comfortable with removing it from the certificate. So.
Wonderful.
Okay, let's see. Something else that was done that was not in S 127 is related here in section 10 and these next few pieces. This is regarding protections for individuals in housing and public accommodations. So the House, let me back up. The Senate, initially, you included language in 127 that added citizenship and immigration status into the protections in public accommodation, and you added citizenship and the protections in unfair housing practices. The House took that, continued to work on it, and they kind of expanded it slightly. And the Senate Economic Development Committee took their work that they were doing on that side in 127, S 127 your bill, and went ahead and included it here in H 479. What this would do is this first piece here, this first section, section 10, it states that in order to conduct a background or a credit check, a landlord may request a social security number from a residential rental applicant. In the event the applicant doesn't have a social security number, the landlord shall accept an original copy of an unexpired form of government issued ID or an individual taxpayer identification number. Some individuals don't have a social security number, wanting to ensure that in statute landlords would be required to accept those other forms in order to do those checks.
It's been a football for a couple of years, so it sounds like a reasonable place that landed.
So from there, what is different is, as I mentioned, the Senate version had citizenship and immigration status in public accommodations. This proposal would keep that, but it would add immigration status into the section that makes it, unlawful housing practices, unfair housing practices. So the Senate version had citizenship. This now proposals adding immigration status, expanding that. What was also added, though, is down here at the end of that section. So this is in unfair housing. It's a subsection D, which says, if required by federal law, verification of immigration status or differential treatment on the basis of citizenship or immigration status shall not constitute a violation of subsection A. So the House General Committee, as they were deliberating on this, there was some concern about what is potentially, if there were a change at federal level, if federal law changed and it said that you shall validate immigration status prior to renting to an individual. We don't, you all don't want to put, landlords in a situation where they're in conflict between federal and state law. So that section was included.
Okay,
There was also, and this is probably, relevant for this committee here, is this subsection E. There was also discussion about financial institutions and lending money. And at the federal level, banks are authorized to take into account someone's immigration status when making a determination of whether or not to issue a loan. It's part of their risks that they can, analyze and making those determinations. And so, working with Maria Royal, drafted up this language in subsection E, which says for purposes of subdivision A6, and A6 above is where it says you can't discriminate against these people in issuing out, loans and mortgages, etc., for housing. So for purposes of that subdivision, it's not unlawful discrimination for a lender to consider a credit applicant's immigration status to the extent such status has a bearing on a lender's rights and remedies regarding loan repayment, and further provided it's consistent with federal law.
I would assume if ICE picks you up and you get sent to El Salvador, you might have a hard time paying what you're paying for.
Yes, ma'am.
And, yeah, okay. That is good.
There are some sections here related to housing appeals. This was not in S 127. You would be best to probably have Ellen walk through these sections, but I will also comment that my understanding is that the Senate Natural Resources Committee is proposing to strike these sections.
Oh,
So,
and they're not in our jurisdiction, so.
I will just kind of skip over those for now. I'm going to take us to section 19. Which is going to start with brownfields. This is all stuff that you all have reviewed, but I'm going to get to the change that was made at the request of JFO where I misspoke a second ago, thinking that it hadn't been done yet. And actually it had been. So my apologies for that. Chris, again, my apologies for the heart palpitation. This section 23 is slightly different than what was in S 127 initially. It's not money that is currently being appropriated. It's money that had been appropriated, I believe, in FY 24. The JFO wanted to kind of alter the language to make it work with language that corresponds in the budget. So there's no substantive change to this section. I just wanted to point out it's slightly worded different, but it's just authorizing money that had been appropriated in FY 24 to be dispersed in a different manner. And then the rest of this is you have smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. These are technical amendments that were in 127, no changes there. That was done on the floor. And then there's also this is slightly new, or is new, I should say. It's not slightly new. This is our positive rental payment pilot program. This was not in S 127 that initially came to you. This would create a 2-year pilot program with the state treasurer's office to provide rent or rental payment to credit agencies for individuals, renters. And this is a pilot program. They're instructed to contract with a third party to administer it, to identify certain landlords and enroll up to 100 renters to try to do the pilot. I will also highlight in section 26A that the treasurer's office requested $100,000 to do this pilot. It was not in the budget. So 26A basically says it's implementing the sections contingent upon appropriation. There isn't an appropriation, so they're not going to do this, is my understanding. And then you get to the tax increment financing piece, section 27 and 28. This is where, again, no changes to what you all passed. So.
And there was no changes. All right. The only thing in here we've got is the TIF, the infrastructure for housing. We've worked on that a lot. Looks like this may be going to a post. Seems to be funds and things set up. So, questions right now for Cameron? Okay, I'm not seeing any. What is your pleasure?
We move favorably in 479 as received from Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs.
Senator Chittenden has moved age 479 favorably. Is it sent to us from Housing, Economic Development and General Affairs? Is there further discussion? Not clerkish. Call the roll.
Senator Chittenden, yes. Senator Beck.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
Yes.
Senator Matos. Senator Hardy. Rulick. Senator Cummings.
Yes. Passes 4-0-3. You want to do, I'm looking at you guys.
Do it. Senator Brock would like it.
For you, there's one portion of the bill that I absolutely do not like.
Okay.
Okay,
Fair enough.
that's right. I think that's it, committee. We cleared Friday, but that doesn't mean we're clear. Thank you. You knocked out a whole bunch of